Hi, welcome to your Tuesday Fix with me, Jo Henderson, part of the marketing team at Dux Soup. And joining me today, I have our head of professional services, Giles Garnett, and Scott Wright, our head of sales. Who's there? Hey, we're all here. Hello.
Hello.
Between Scott and Giles, they're not only Dux Soup experts, but true LinkedIn ninjas, hence why we've opted for this Q&A power hour today. To get us started, we picked 5 questions at random, which were submitted by yourselves when you registered for today's session. Once we get going, you can add your questions, your other questions, into the questions box on the GoToWebinar dashboard. And I'll also add any links that we share during our discussions in the chat box on the panel. Later today, you will also be sent the recording from the session so you can recap anything you'd like a reminder on. As always, if you're enjoying what Dux Soup has to offer, don't forget to leave us a G2 review for the opportunity to win one of our limited edition caps. Look, I've changed the view today, so they're here. But yeah, you can have one of those caps. We've got the blue, the yellow, and the raspberry. And if you're new to Dux Soup, and I know a lot of you are today, then please take advantage of our free trial too. You can get access to all of the features that we cover today, and we don't even ask for your credit card details. So it's a perfect opportunity for you to have a little play, see how it works, and see what you think. So I will pop the G2 review chat, review link, and the 2-week trial link in the chat as we get started. And I think, yeah, short and sweet from me today. Who shall I hand over to? Scott, would you like to start?
Sure thing. Let's get into some of the questions here. So some of the questions that have been submitted, one of the first ones we have here, which is really great. I'm very new to Dux Soup. How do I get the best out of it as a new user? Wow. So yeah, I think one of the first things is to realize is not to, first off, just don't get overwhelmed, right? There are a lot of features inside of Dux Soup, but it is also a very simple tool at the end of the day. You need about 3 things to make sure that Dux Soup is up and running effectively. One is to obviously have the extension in Dux Soup downloaded, right? And don't forget that there's a free 2-week trial when you download it for the first time of our turbo version. The second thing you need is a campaign that you make inside of the Dux Dash that you want to go ahead and create with messaging. Then the third thing is your list of where you want to go ahead and enroll it into. And then other than that, a lot of the other features that are very, very powerful of Dux Soup can be sort of accessed and looked at later on. They don't need to be sort of addressed right then and there out of the gates. Also, other things to sort of think about when you're getting started is a lot of people want to adjust throttling and set their throttling to maybe very high or see how much they can crank out of Dux Soup immediately. What I recommend a lot of times is just start out with what the default settings are on Dux Soup, and then increase the connections and numbers over time, week after week, as you start sort of getting familiarized and comfortable with all the other features. But yeah, out of the gate, I would definitely try to keep your campaign simple, maybe a connection request and a follow-up, and go ahead and just build it on a list inside of regular LinkedIn or Sales Nav. Giles, any thoughts there?
Yeah, from speaking to many users over the last few years who are sort of starting out with Dux Soup, there seems to be sort of, a real steep learning curve. Some people are, straight in there and they're able to get up and running very quickly. But there's a lot of people for whom, some of the terminology, especially in LinkedIn, isn't necessarily entirely clear as well. So be familiar with some of the LinkedIn terminologies, familiarize yourself with the LinkedIn environment as well, because Dux Soup is built to accompany that particular platform, and have a plan as to what you're trying to achieve. Don't just go in there and thinking, I've got a tool, I can solve all my problems just by having a tool. Have a plan. What are you trying to achieve? Who are you trying to target? What are your goals? And in order to have good goals and meet those goals, of course, you need to be able to have a process and theoretically measure things. Now I'm going sort of down into a bit nitty gritty here, but even from a high level, if your plan, and this will link to the next question, if your plan is just to try and make yourself more visible on LinkedIn, you could just visit hundreds of profiles, for example. You could use it as simply as that. The campaigns and everything like that. It's all perfectly valid. But from the absolute basic point of view, you could use Dux Soup to just visit hundreds of profiles and publicize yourself on LinkedIn to thousands of people in a very short space of time. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. familiarize yourself with the LinkedIn terminology, and you know, walk before you can run. And that relates again to what Scott said there about the throttling. Understand the consequences of what you're doing before you then jump onto the next idea.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Cool. And as I said, we segue nicely into what's the best way to just visit profiles and how do you track this. So this of course is this covers a number of different areas really, because it depends on which version of Dux Soup you've got. Because of course we have 3 different paid plans. We have the Pro version, the Turbo version, the Cloud version. Cloud version released in back end of last year. Incredibly popular with our install base, so we're seeing a great uptake of that particular version. If you're wanting to literally just visit profiles, there's a couple of things you may need to make sure you do, and we'll touch on these a couple of times, I think, as we go through some more of these questions that we've got. First of all, make sure your profile's up to date, number 1. Make sure your LinkedIn profile's up to date. Number 2, make sure that people can see that you're visiting. Check your privacy and visibility settings. There's no point in visiting hundreds of profiles unless you're making people aware of it, unless you're trying to just gather data, of course. If you're just trying to gather data, that's a different matter. And then, yeah, if you've got the Pro version or whatever version you've got, you can literally then just go and find a list and get Dux Soup to auto visit them if you're running the Pro version. If you're wanting to track that with Pro, you need to be familiar with tagging. So you tag every profile that you visit. So that's something to think about there. So you can look all of these things up maybe in due course. And maybe as we go through, I'll share a couple of links from our support pages. If you're using Turbo or Cloud, you could create a campaign which just contains auto visits. And then you just enroll thousands of people into those auto visit campaigns. Dux Soup will automatically track that for them. Because you're putting people into a campaign, Dux Soup will find those people, and you can then look at those people through the funnel. And I'm maybe talking a bit more advanced here for some of our users, but hopefully that makes sense anyway. So yeah, use that functionality to visit profiles, and we will definitely touch on this back towards the end of the call when we're touching on some of our tips and tricks as well. Anything to add there, Scott?
Not really. I will say that is the enrolling for thousands of profiles. Yeah, if your goal is just to be visiting those profiles, for sure, absolutely, and you're not going to be worrying about sending connection requests or any of that type of thing, because when you are building out your campaigns and whatnot, you want to be conscious of your sort of queue. Again, this is a Dux Soup terminology. And so being aware of, if you do enroll thousands and thousands of profiles and then want to all of a sudden start to do some connection requests, you want to be cognizant of sort of how your queue is sort of set up in that case. But yeah, the visiting aspect is key. And then the first thing you touched on, which is making sure that your profile is visible. That's huge. I've encountered so many support calls where people didn't even realize that. One thing is, like, maybe if you're not even sure, grab a friend or a colleague's phone and look yourself up who's not connected with you or something like that, and take a look and see, so you can see how your profile is being generated or sort of seen from their point of view. But yeah, those are all great points.
Cool. Onwards and upwards. Scott, you can take this one, yeah.
How do I send out mass mailings to people I have targeted on Sales Navigator? I'm assuming we're talking mass mailings in terms of in-mails. Is that correct? I'm assuming that's what we mean here.
The way I read that implies to me in mails, because yeah, otherwise it'd be connection requests, I think we'd be talking about, yeah.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, so in the sake of in-mail conversations, so it's important to know with in-mails in general, when you're on Sales Navigator, this has not with Recruiter, but on Sales Navigator, you get 50 in-mail credits per month, right? Those can accumulate up to 150. You cannot purchase more. You can on Recruiter, but that's a different conversation, right? And so then it will sit at 150 until it goes from there. Oh, go ahead, Giles, what were you gonna say?
If somebody responds within a set amount of time, you get your credit back.
That is true. I haven't gotten to that point yet. Yes, but that is correct. Yes, so you will be able to get that credit back in those cases if somebody does respond to your in-mails. But yeah, how you would do this right now is you can go ahead and build out a campaign on Dux Soup that has an in-mail in it, right? Or a series of in-mails if you'd like. Then once you have your campaign set and saved, you can then, and this is for the Turbo version, Turbo and Cloud, I'll talk about Pro in a second. You can go to your list or your search inside of Sales Nav and go ahead and enroll the people from that search or list into a campaign that has in-mails associated with it. Dux Soup will go ahead and utilize the in-mail credits if it's available. And then obviously, as you mentioned, Giles, it will go ahead and credit you back if the person goes ahead and replies to that in-mail, which is fantastic. On the Pro version, it's a slightly different, but it's still available. In the Pro version, inside of the options, you can go ahead and turn on a feature for the in-mails, type out your in-mail, and the same rules sort of go ahead and apply there. Now, for all of our platforms, though, there is a feature which allows you to send out unlimited in-mails, if you will. And how that works is by leveraging people's open or profiles that are open link members. And an open link member is somebody who's available or willing to accept in-mails that won't cost you any sort of a credit. And in order to do that, if you go into the Dux Soup options on either Pro, Turbo, or Cloud, and you go to the skipping section, there will be an area that says skip if open link member. And if you turn that on, go ahead and then enroll and launch your campaign however you will. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and demonstrate it here, if that's what you were doing. Giles, did you freeze? Well, okay, you might be coming back online here in a second. But yeah, if you go into the Dux Soup options under the skipping tab, there'll be an area that says skip if not an open link member, and you go ahead and turn that on, then enroll, and Dux Soup will skip over everybody that is not an open link member, and it will only put in the people that can that will allow you to send in-mails for free, therefore bypassing the in-mail credits. So one thing that I've seen people do is that works out really well is utilize your 50 per month or 150 if you have 3 months accumulated. Utilize those in your first campaign, then come back to your list or your search, turn that feature on, and then re-enroll that list again. And then that will be able to ensure that it's going over for the proper folks there. Did we lose Giles? Hey,
Hi.
Joey there. Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I was almost like, did we lose me? I wasn't sure.
I didn't lose you. I think it's Giles, so we'll carry on, and I'm sure he'll rejoin.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah. So in short, like those are some of the ways that you can utilize in-mails, which can be incredibly powerful to be able to send out many more in-mails that are outside of the realm. Now, it is also important to note that I'm not sure on a percentage. Giles would probably know more about this, but I believe it's in the realm of about 15 to 20% of your list will be associated with open link members, right? So do keep that in mind when you're sort of building this out. But that is one way that you can bypass the sort of restrictions there. Should I go ahead and be presenter then and share my screen since I think Giles was? Hello? Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, I've muted, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, definitely. Let's change presenter. Let's put you as a presenter.
Yep, apologies for the inconvenience, everybody. Technical difficulties, stand by here 1 second.
Have you got them? Do you want me to send you the link?
No, I got it right here. Here we are. Can we see my screen?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, fantastic. Oh, I went a little too far. Apologies, everybody. We're taking over presenters as, here we go.
At least everyone knows it's live, hey?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can definitely tell it's live on this end. Makes me think about like performing in the Olympics. That's got to be a little bit more pressure than we're going through right now. Anyways, right. So being able to continue. So that was the question for how do I send out mass mailings or in-mails to people that I've targeted on LinkedIn or Sales Navigator, right? So just to recap that, in the Pro version, you can go inside of the actions and adjust that. And there's an area in there for you to turn on in-mails. And you can go ahead and write out your in-mail, hit run. And also in Turbo and in Cloud versions, you can create campaigns with in-mail steps. It's also worth noting that in Turbo and Cloud, when you have a campaign, when somebody replies, then it will go ahead and kill the sequence as well. And then lastly is you can send unlimited in-mails in the skipping section of the options inside of Dux Soup across all of our plans, Pro, Turbo, and Cloud by sending out in-mails to only open link members. Cool. A campaign, so on to our next question here. A campaign I started on June 13th this is like a math problem, on June 13th with 233 profiles, got 189 enrolled, 5 invited, and 1 accepted. What went wrong? And we started it on June 13th, so it started quite some time ago. Well, a couple of things. And a couple of things can happen in this case here. One of them is that the campaign, there's a couple of things that could happen here. The campaign can be potentially turned off if you ever did turn the campaign off for whatever reason and forget about it and forget to turn it back on. Dux Soup will pause anybody that is currently in that campaign in that sense. And by the way, this is for Turbo and for Cloud licenses in this case. It does look like it got through almost all of the enrolls, but not all of them. It looks like some of them could have stopped, and so maybe during the enroll process, also on Turbo or Cloud, it looks like that person may have shut the browser down as well, which would have only resulted in 189 and not being able to finish the rest of the 233, because when enrolling, you need to let the enroll process finish before you can then move away from the icon there. And then 5 invited, that really can be because also of your list. Does your list ensure that they are all sort of second and third degree connections in those cases? And with 1 accepted, that can also be associated with how your sort of overall campaign set up in these cases. I think this was also a Giles related question, so I think he may have a little bit more, but yeah, there could be a few different items or things that have gone wrong depending on what license and plan you have here and how you were sort of managing your campaign and best practices to do so. But retracking from here, what I would do is on June 13th during the 233, when I'm ready and I have my list or my search in front of me and I go to enroll the profiles from Dux Soup Turbo or Cloud, I let all 233 profiles get enrolled first. Then once that happens, and it goes through that, you'll see all 233 in there, and don't shut the tab down or shut Dux Soup's process down during that. Let the enroll process sort of finish. Then from there, I would also, if you're on Turbo, you want to make sure that your browser is up, on, and running as well, because that can pose a potential issue into the overall performance of your campaigns. If you're on Cloud, that's not going to be an issue, as Dux Soup will continue on as normal. And then if you're seeing that you have a low number of invites, it's just important for you to go in there and see what was your invite throttle sort of set to, and other items like that. So hopefully that one is on. Is Giles still back on yet, or is he?
I'm back on, yeah. I've been listening to your very complete answer there, Scott. Yeah, reading this one, there's a number of reasons that this could be. It could be that, and I've seen this occasionally, that a user has maybe turned off the remote control function, so not all of the things have been processed. The best thing to do, if this is your situation, is to email our support team, info@dux-soup.com. Then we can have a look very quickly at your settings, make sure the settings are correct, and then we can do a sort of a proper précis as to what's happened here, because there are, as Scott's just mentioned, a whole raft of possible causes for this, from the type of campaign to who's in the list to whether your Chrome version is up to date and all sorts of bits and pieces. So yeah, what went wrong? That's a very wide-reaching question, which has a huge number of answers, and it gives us the perfect opportunity to sort of also explain our support team is available Monday through Friday around the clock to be able to answer these questions through our support pages.
And if they can't solve the issue, when they're through our chat or through our email base, then a lot of times they'll end up sending you a support link for you to go ahead and meet with one of us. And yeah, 50-50 chance you'll get myself or you'll get Giles. So hopefully you like us. But yeah, that's a good way to put it. Great to have you back, by the way, Giles.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. I think it's so warm here. I wonder if my laptop overheated.
Well, if you want to take the next one, go ahead.
Are in-mail messages better than regular LinkedIn messaging for sales? Well, there's, as we've already touched on inmails, and I also shared in the chat while Scott was hopefully before I disappeared off the link, the details about how you can make the most of your inmail credits and use those open link skipping options that we have. Are inmail messages better than LinkedIn messaging for sales? To be honest, it very much depends upon your target audience. There are so many variables here. With an in-mail message, of course, you can write a more complete message. You have more scope for being able to paint a picture. You have more characters to use in your message. You can make it a more extensive message. However, just selling on LinkedIn is a very, very tough, it's a very tough audience. What works better is actually just trying to start conversations on LinkedIn. So some people just ignore emails. Some people just, yeah, they get a message request, they just ignore it, especially if it's particularly sales orientated. It depends what people are using the LinkedIn platform for. Some people, of course, are using it to take on, to be receptive to such messages. So yeah, to be honest, LinkedIn messages, regular messages, well, LinkedIn messaging or in-mails. When you're talking about LinkedIn messaging, I assume what you're talking about here is connection request messages, because of course, once you've got somebody as a first degree connection, you can then send them more extensive messaging later anyway. So there are different facets to this and different approaches depending on who your audience is. Are you business to business selling, and what's the industry that you're in, and various other factors as well. Scott,
And I think I do, yeah. And I mean, I feel like I could give an entire TED talk on this to some degree, but I'll keep it very short by saying, like, the in-mails are great in the same way that, emails to some degree. I mean, emails are great as well. But emails, right, if you think about it, it's almost being sent to somebody's inbox, and the chances of them opening it and or replying in, by the way, all granted that these are in a sales context, by the way, I just want to make sure that that's clear, not in like a recruiting context, because that's different. But yeah, when you send an email, right, the chances of them replying back are very slim. However, when you do send an email, it's almost like a digital flyer that you're sort of putting on somebody's car, right? I look at in-mails to some degree at the same point. While Giles, exactly what you said, you can be much more concise and consistent and be able to really craft out your messaging in terms of what you want to say in an in-mail. I've seen most people not reply to those in most cases. However, this does differ industry to industry and based on what you're selling and who you're selling to, right? So I do think it is worth an A/B test try across the board for anything that it is that you're doing. And one thing you can do is, if you want to give this a try, if you haven't already, is then just also ensure that you, if you're on Turbo or Cloud, create a campaign that has an in-mail and then have the connection request messages or connection request afterwards, which would be then followed up by direct LinkedIn messaging. And Giles said this so perfectly by saying that LinkedIn in general, you can get a lot better results if you are trying to go in to get a reply, to then have a conversation that will lead to you executing your call to action. So in general, it's sort of what we've both seen on each side of this, but I think I've personally seen better results by doing LinkedIn messaging and connecting with people, building out your brand and your base, than messaging them after on there.
But there are some people who've had fantastic success with in-mail. So, everybody's experience can be different there, and both are valid.
Yep. Awesome.
We have some more questions that have been coming in, Joe.
We do. Ed has asked, can I send out mass messages to targeted LinkedIn members using Sales Navigator? So he sent this out whilst we were discussing the in-mail mass messaging. So I think this is more about kind of campaign messages.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I send out messages to targeted LinkedIn members using Sales Navigator? Yeah. So basically, if you create your list in LinkedIn, and that can be in Sales Navigator, and then you, depending on which version of Dux Soup you're using, you would then choose the action that you wish to carry out, whether that's an in-mail or a connection request, as we've talked about there. And then you would, if you're using Turbo or Cloud, you'd enroll those people into that campaign. Or if you're using Pro, you would auto visit them with the action required. We've got a series of very insightful blog posts, which I'm going to dig one out in a second, which will hopefully answer this question and show you how you can connect your list, or effectively build your list in LinkedIn Sales Nav, and then enroll people or get Dux Soup to auto visit. I'll add it into the chat section in a minute. But yeah, it's a very, very straightforward process and hopefully pretty intuitive with Dux Soup.
Fabulous, thank you. We have a question here from, apologies if I've said this wrong, Huino. Can clay.run be integrated with Dux Soup?
I can jump on this actually a little bit here. Natively, there's no native integration with Dux Soup and clay.run. However, I have explored a little bit. I haven't spoken to anybody really yet. I am slightly in touch with Clay to talk a little bit further, but in short, really almost, I'll put this in air quotes, anything to some degree can be sort of integrated via Zapier, obviously. And so depending on what it is that you want to do, you can set something up in those cases, right? So depending on what you want to use clay.run for, whether it's enriching beforehand, after, or doing this or doing that, then having a Dux Soup step go and execute afterwards based on that or some sort of a trigger, right? Can absolutely be done by way of building it inside of make.com, formerly Integromat, or inside of Zapier for sure, absolutely.
And just to add to that as well, our next webinar on the 20th of August will be about how to integrate Dux Soup with your CRM. So Huino, if that's how you pronounce it, I'm sorry. But definitely join us for that session if you're interested, because we will be looking at Make and Zapier and how we can integrate using those two tools. Let's have a look. Oh, Sean has asked, how often should I post?
Yeah, that's a great one. It's interesting. The other day I was just on LinkedIn on my phone, and it asked me to go ahead and contribute to an article as an expert on LinkedIn. It asked me to do that. And then when I finished it, it went ahead and said, yeah, to help make yourself a better LinkedIn member, try posting, I believe it said 3 times a week. Now, this was just something I wanted to share with everybody. That's something that I just saw recently through LinkedIn, informing me that I should do that, which would be posting sort of 3 times a week in these cases. I think in general, a good habit is to at least minimum try posting once a week if you can, if you're available. While it's not required, it will definitely help you become a much better LinkedIn citizen, if you will, overall, and how LinkedIn will sort of perceive your profile and yourself and a lot of these sort of items. Giles, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and one thing you need to also consider, when you're posting on LinkedIn, you don't have to post chapter and verse. It doesn't have to be, your entire life history and pages of information. It could just be a thought-provoking comment. It could be an observation. It doesn't have to be a long post. A lot of people I'm seeing, using, for example, if they've got content, maybe they've got an article or they've got, webinars they've been running, that sort of stuff, is using, teasers and posting teasers and then the link to whatever there is. So you don't think about having to write lots and lots of content just to get a post out there. Remember, every post you put out there will trigger notifications to your followers, to your wider network, and will increase the chance of people seeing you. I always would talk about, the 3 different phases of sort of LinkedIn lead generation actions. It's first of all, you want people to notice you. You want them to recognize you. You want them to visit your profile. Then ultimately, you want to be able to connect with them, whether that's them reaching out to you or you reaching out to them. And then third of all, you want to get them into a conversation. And that comes back to what we talked about earlier, not necessarily selling, but getting into a conversation so you can then move the conversation forward to your call to action, whatever that may be. So it's all part of that package. I think what Scott says there, 3 times a week, that's kind of like, if we all had the time to do that, that would be amazing. But I think on a weekly basis, making yourself aware, making people aware of you, I should say, is really, really important. And if you are able to do that, it will, as Scott said there, add to your reputation on the platform, which will in turn impact your SSI, which increases your your visibility. It also increases the likelihood of you appearing on other search results or higher up search results.
I think, can I just add to that as well? I think another thing that I've, looking at some of the statistics lately, another thing that I think can be quite useful if you're kind of strapped for time is to actually repost something that you've seen but has relevance and credibility within your industry sector. So something, you know, if you've read a good article with some good advice, and actually sharing that is also a useful thing to do.
Yeah, and I want to add to yes, everything you guys are absolutely saying. These are all great points. At the same time, don't always. I've seen a lot of people sort of just like repost something of their company, for instance, and they don't really put a lot of thought or anything else into that, which is totally fine. But I encourage also people to try and post things like what Giles was saying that could be somewhat thought-provoking of something small. Or, you know, what Joe is saying, to repost somebody else's stuff, but maybe with also your thoughts associated with it, right? Just like a little blurb or something will definitely help out in these cases.
Fabulous, thank you both. Luke has asked, what's the ideal time frame for follow-up messages?
Do you want to take that one, or shall I, Scott?
I'll take the first part. I'm curious on your thoughts. So I've been using Dux Soup since 2018 for quite some time, and what I have found myself that works really well. Now, granted, the many years of selling this, I've been selling into large enterprise companies and whatnot. And what I found works for me the best is your first follow-up going out somewhere in the realm of 2 to 4 hours after your connection. And it's saying something around the lines of thanks for the connection, first name, and then some sort of a question to help provoke and the conversation to get forward. Then my remaining follow-ups would be somewhere in the realm of about 3 to 10 days from there. But Giles, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, from doing this for the last 5-6 years, anytime within the first 24 hours for that first acknowledgement, nice to meet you, maybe a question, just something to you know, it's being polite and engaging with people. And then anytime again, sort of 5 to 10 days around that sort of week time for that next step. But again, don't make those messages too long. If you make them really long, people will read the first 2 lines and will move on. They will not read it. I've seen a number of people that will, for example, they'll send a message, and then a week later they send you know, half a novel of information. People never read it. The other mistake I see a lot of people doing, and you know, this is something I've referred to a number of times in webinars, on calls, they send a follow-up message, nice to meet you. A day later, another message. A day later, another message. A day later, another message. Believe you me, by the time message number 3 or 4 is going out, you've probably been disconnected from them because they've said, yeah, this person's spamming me, and I don't want to be connected to them anymore. And so you'll then see your follow-up messages fail. So be aware, be respectful of people's time, be respectful of the way you communicate with people, and think about how you would expect to be treated in these situations. If you think what you're doing is reasonable and you think it's okay, then, you know, take that into consideration. But, you know, don't abuse the platform and just send repeated messages one after the other, and give people time to digest them. Remember, Dux Soup, if it's monitoring for responses, so people respond, it breaks that cycle of the campaign anyway. So they're not going to be, you know, inflicted with your next message unless you, of course, override that and ask the campaign to continue. So yeah, that's you know, I always think, yeah, first 24 hours, then a week, and then from then on you're looking at sort of at least 10 days to 2 weeks if you're extending your campaign out for the longer term.
Thank you very much. Here's another little nugget that we like to talk about. What are the maximum connection requests that can be sent daily, weekly, and monthly?
Yeah, that's so yeah, Giles, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. But I know we're on the same page to some degree, but there is stuff that talks about you know, X%, I think it's 3%, if I'm not mistaken, of your overall network base can sort of help to tell you in these areas. In general, what I sort of like to abide by across the board is, if you're a new user of Dux Soup to some degree, is like keeping it at the default and increasing weekly over week until you fly too close to the sun, which is where LinkedIn will go ahead and slap you on the hand and give you the soft warning saying, hey, you've reached your LinkedIn invitation limit for the week. Please try again next week. And then that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. But Giles, I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah. Now, I've regaled this story a number of times, so apologies if you've heard this one before. So I ran an experiment last year where I enrolled 1,000 or so people into a campaign, and I started off by sending 25 invites per day. After a week, I went to 30 invites a day, and then I went to 35, and then I went to 40. So I took one step per week. It was like warming up an email account, effectively. Now, remember, I've got a Sales Navigator account. My SSI is reasonably high, but after about 4 weeks, I think it was, I triggered that warning, that little warning that Scott mentions there. Hey, you're out of invites for this week. Please try again next week. What I did is I corrected down by 5, back down to 35 or whatever it was. And then I carried increasing on step by step over a number of weeks. And after about 10 weeks or so, I was able to send 65 invites per day without any problems at all. Now, remember, I was also achieving a really good acceptance rate. Over 45% of the people I was reaching out to were accepting my connection request. And a good proportion of those people were also engaging with me, sending me messages back. So I had a very successful campaign. I was doing the acceleration slowly over time. And I was able to do that, get to that point. What I'm tending to see, and this is from speaking to a lot of people, since this sort of correction that LinkedIn put in a year to 18 months ago about pushing people more and more towards paid accounts, what I'm seeing mostly is people with, for example, a Sales Navigator account with a reasonable network, mostly are able to maintain a connection request rate of somewhere between 40 and 60 per day. But you have to warm up to it. And then you can bob along safely under that ceiling, under that warning level. Remember, Dux Soup will pick up if that pop-up appears from LinkedIn saying you're out of invites for now. So remember that's built into the Dux Soup functionality. So it will snooze for a day or two before it then tries again. Because one of the factors is, the one thing we can't control, of course, is when people will accept your connection request. We have no control over that at all. When people do accept your connection request, that will kind of release more, for want of a better word, virtual credits of invites for you. So when you get that pop-up that says you're out of invites for now, actually you're out of invites until some people have accepted. And then you'll find you'll be able to do more. It's important to keep on top of your outstanding invites as well. So part of the Dux Soup functionality is that we can get Dux Soup to auto withdraw invites after a set period of time. Which is a really, really useful functionality. I spoke to somebody recently who was having trouble sending invites out. It turned out they had over 2,000 outstanding invites. We brought that number down and straight away they were able to send out more invites. So there's an awful lot of strings to this bow, if you like, and lots of different threads that you can go down. I've shared a link in the chat box, which summarizes everything we have gathered at Dux Soup over the last 9 years or so around keeping your LinkedIn account safe. So before you play with those throttling settings, make yourself familiar with the aspects that are in that particular article. Do you have anything else to add there, Scott? I've been rambling for a while.
No, it's good. I will just sort of cap it off by saying everything that Giles is mentioning. He's sort of leading into saying, the last 9 years, this is what we've seen, trying this experiment and sort of seeing. It kind of goes to show you that that this is not a known thing, right? And it makes sense. LinkedIn doesn't want people to know what is the maximum number or figure out the formula, because then it would allow for other people to, I guess, game the system, if you will, right? And so it's important to sort of know, like, there is not the, hey, you can get away with X number. It's a variable, if you will, equation with different, I should say it's equation with different variables sort of built into it that are based on whether how many pending you have, how many this, what's your accepted connection rate, are you paying for Sales Nav, are you doing these? These are all different factors that sort of play into the number that you can sort of get away with. But that's why this little feature that we do have, where Dux Soup will go to sleep for X days, if that little limit is hit, is such a wonderful feature, allowing you to play with the limits a little bit further if you need to.
Great, thank you very much. Sebastian has asked, in the case of a SaaS business, do you recommend that we send a connection message like a normal conversation, or in that first in-mail, send a message with the link of the platform for the client to try?
Giles, you want to take that one first?
I'm just rereading the question. Bear with me 1 second. I think as Scott said earlier, I'd do an A/B test. To be absolutely honest, I would be thinking about, here, get your A/B test set up 2 campaigns. If you've got Dux Soup Turbo or Cloud, set up 2 campaigns. One which is a connection request, like a normal conversation, just introduce yourself, ask a question, try and stimulate a conversation. And the other campaign, I would go for the inmail, try and send a bit more information about it and see what the response rate is, see which works best. That's the ideal scenario there, to use an A/B test to see how receptive your audience may be.
Yeah, 100%. And I have a lot of thoughts on this, but that's also why I kicked it over to you, Giles, first to see on your thoughts there. But I agree, doing the A/B test there. I think with the in-mails is great. Again, this kind of comes back to the idea of like not a digital flyer, if you will, but you're at least sort of maximizing the opportunity to get the URL over in front of the person for them to go ahead and see it. However, I always like doing the connection request and adding somebody to your network, getting them to reply, having a conversation, and then executing your call to action. And if you're able to use a question that is somewhat qualifying in nature, but also a little provocative to some degree, you can kind of stand out from the crowd. So whatever your SaaS product is, if you're able to, hey, out of curiosity, I'm not sure what your SaaS product does, but if it was something related to Dux Soup, saying something like, hey, out of curiosity, have you ever tried LinkedIn automation before? ? Because we work with Dux Soup here, and we want to get them to try and use our product. Well, if you ever tried LinkedIn automation before, that can stand out from everybody else, allowing for a reply to sort of come in, and then I can respond back with, hey, you should take a look at this, and here's my URL for you to go ahead and try the free trial or some of these types of things. I just would not package that all together in your connection message, nor would I also package that together in your first follow-up to the person. I would package together maybe putting the URL and like a link to download your stuff as one of the later messages in your campaign, as almost like a breakup message to some degree, as if you tried all other options to get them to reply and they haven't worked. And do remember, at the end of the day, LinkedIn is sort of a platform that allows you to stalk other people. I sort of joke on that, but because of that, they can see who you are, right? The person they can click on your website, they can go and do that due diligence if they'd like as well. They can go ahead and see all that information. So, yeah.
Thank you. Eric has asked, let's have a look. He's asked a couple of different questions.
Yep, I've just had a read of Eric's questions. Shall I read them out there? I've got 2,600 people enrolled, so many invited, so many accepted. How can I get the 500 that weren't invited to get invited? I have a number of people in my queue who have been sitting there for a while, blah, 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 blah. Now, Eric, I suspect there's a number of things at play here. So you've invited 2,600, sorry, enrolled 2,600, and 80% of them or so have been invited. It may be that 500 or so that weren't invited, those people may have required an email address in order to send an invite. We could have a look at the logs and work that out. It could be a case that they're too far removed from you within LinkedIn for you to be able to reach out to them. So there's some different things at play there. Depends upon that list of people. And then you've got some items that are there that have been sitting since April. Well, I suspect those are people who've responded to you. And as I mentioned earlier, if somebody responds to you mid-campaign, that breaks the campaign. So if you go into the funnel flow and look at the responded people, you'll see there the responses. And then if you want the campaign to continue, you can press the continue button or put them into a different campaign, take the thing. If people have been in the queue since April and there may be follow-up messages or auto visits, depending on what's in your campaign, the chances are they've probably responded to you and broken that particular cycle.
Fabulous.
There's also a follow-up question I see there from Eric. I've got 2,000 invites sitting there. How do I get them uninvited and never reattempt to connect? So I've actually put a link in there to say how you can get Dux Soup to auto withdraw those invites. One thing you may want to do before you auto withdraw them, though, if you're wanting to re-invite them at a later date, is you may want to get Dux Soup to scan that list. So go into that list of outstanding invites, use the scan function of Dux Soup, and we'll put some links in as to how we can do all of that as well. You get Dux Soup to scan those 2,000 people. You've got a file then of 2,000 people who you can then re-invite at a later date or put into a new campaign, whatever it may be. Remember, if you withdraw an invite, you have to then wait another 3 weeks before you can re-invite somebody. So do consider that there accordingly.
Giles, in that case, I'm not, because I'm still sharing my screen, so I'm not able to see the exact question here, but it sounds like it's associated with the funnel flow. And in that case, would they be able to also potentially copy the campaign metrics to Google spreadsheet and then remove anybody that is still in the enrolled phase potentially, since they haven't been sent out the invites or something like that? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. As Scott rightly points out there, you could go into the funnel flow, you could copy your data out of the funnel flow, put that into a spreadsheet, and then you could see the various stages that everybody's achieved within that particular campaign. So you'll be able to see who's been enrolled but not invited. You'll be able to see who's been invited but not accepted, and also those who've responded. So from that data there, you can create one big spreadsheet, pull out the people that you want to do something else with. But remember, you would need to withdraw those invites if you want before you can send a new invite and wait a number of weeks before that happens. So that there's various different aspects to that, Eric, and I hope that's helpful. If we need to follow up in more detail, then of course reach out to our support team as well.
Thanks for that, guys. Yahya has asked, what would be the best practice to yield a high rate of responses?
I'll jump on this one first, and Giles, I'd love to hear your thoughts too. But I personally have been coming in with questions, and getting Dux Soup overall, or not Dux Soup, but overall, you want to get somebody to accept your connection request, then get them to reply, then have a conversation, and then execute your call to action. And what I've seen work really well is coming in with sort of questions that can be somewhat qualifying in nature, but also I think provocative, which I've sort of mentioned before, and I've done some previous webinars on this before also. But then remembering, taking a step back and thinking like LinkedIn is a social media platform, right? And it's important to remember that it's kind of like Instagram or kind of like Facebook to some degree, right? Except it's meant for professional networking. So if you can kind of approach it with the sort of professional networking in mind and let that sort of evolve into your call to action, then I think you'll get really good results, rather than coming in and saying, here's my value point, this is what we do, this is why you should buy. Instead, change that into maybe the format of a question or sort of networking sort of vibe to say, hey, out of curiosity, what are your thoughts on the future of this or that? That make sure that question though can be easily sort of pivotable into getting your call to action there. But would love to hear your thoughts, Charles.
I absolutely agree with you, Scott. We've seen this sort of evolution of LinkedIn over the last few years, and the way that people have got smarter to reacting to things, and people finding it easier to ignore salesy messages or just flag them and just ignore them or disconnect from people. So yeah, everything you say there, Scott, absolutely agree with. Try and stimulate a conversation. Think about networking rather than selling. And you'll find you'll have a much greater level of success, and you'll get better quality leads that way as well.
That's great. I've just shared to Yahya the links to the blogs that we did from your 2 webinars, Scott, so they can follow us, and I'll put those in the chat as well, actually. I'll do that whilst one of you answers the question from Tatiana. If I download recorded profile data, how can I use the resulting Excel file? And can I also get email data with this function?
Giles, you want to take that one?
Yes, I'll take that one if you want. So as long as you've got Dux Soup recording data within your browser, and this works with Pro and Turbo. With Cloud, there's a slightly different process that you would need to go through in order to get that information. But if you're having the profile data saved locally within your browser cache, you download that from the extension, and you end up with a potentially very extensive CSV file of all of these hundreds or thousands of profiles that you visited. You can then use that CSV file in a number of ways, because there's quite a lot of data in there. You get, all the various LinkedIn URLs, you get the number of connections that people have got, their job history, their skills, where they work, etc., etc. If it's visible, the moment that you visited them, you will see contact details as well. But that, of course, depends upon your connection level with those individuals. So if you're visiting first degree connections, for example, you're probably got an 80% chance of seeing an email address, somewhere between 80 and 90% probably, something like that. If you're visiting non-first degree connections, you've probably got between a 5 and 15% chance of seeing an email address. Depends purely upon what people have put as on their privacy settings as to whether they're going to share that information with people or not. So everyone has control over what data you can see. And then, how you use that data, well, it's up to you. If you've got email addresses, it's up to you what you do with those email addresses. Of course, be aware of all local rules and regulations with regards to email handling and reaching out to people. But then if you've also got the LinkedIn URLs in those particular files, you can then use those files to, for example, enroll people into a campaign, or maybe populate your CRM if you've not already had that information put into your CRM. All of the data there is basically just a reflection of what's in LinkedIn and what's publicly visible. So we're not supplementing the data from any other sources. It's purely what's coming out of LinkedIn there. And so, visiting profiles, whenever you visit a profile, if you've got that data capture enabled, then an email address will be available, will be visible if not. If you want to look for non-first degree connections email addresses, then there we have a Dux points option in order to do an email lookup to see if there's an email address associated with that LinkedIn account. And you can read more about that on our website.
That's
Scott,
great.
do you have anything else to add there?
No, I think you covered it. I was thinking, the Dux Soup points, you covered that. And then, being able to pull that data out from the visits. One thing I will say is I've visited, so you can use Dux Soup to visit likes of a post. And so if you pull up a post or something, you can then visit all the likes that have engaged with that post and then export that data. And you can do different things. One tactic I share is scrub that then for anybody that maybe works for that company, and then scrub it again. And you can, if you scrape it for a competitor's post, right? If you then scrub it for everybody that works there and look for your ICP, you can make certain possible insights about that to say, hey, maybe they used your competitor's sort of tool or technology, and you can write a campaign that targets against that in certain ways. So you can use the visiting option and record the data and pull it out of LinkedIn for different purposes, like also events that are on LinkedIn as well. You can visit all those profiles, and when you go to extract it, you can then run a search, and you can do different things with it there to ensure that is being reflected from wherever you're pulling the data from. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Does Dux Soup keep running when the screensaver is on? Giles, do you want to pick this one up?
No, it doesn't. Basically, as soon as your screen is no longer active, then you will find that Dux Soup will not be able to mimic the clicks of the mouse on the screen. So if you've got screensaver, energy saving mode, whatever it may be, then Dux Soup will not be active. That's if you're running Pro and Turbo. If you've got Cloud, of course, then it will be active because it's potentially always on for you.
Hooray. Hooray.
Real quick on that though, for people who also want to maybe work around that too, things to look at is maybe a personal laptop, right? Something else that you can sort of set up and maybe adjust the display settings to never turn off, or is one way you can also work around that if you don't have the access or ability resources to get onto cloud either to run that.
Good point. I'm just adding the link to the cloud plan for details into the chat as well, for those who are interested in that. Let's have a look. How can this is from Rachel, how can I integrate LinkedIn and HubSpot more effectively to track results of my outreach?
More
Giles, you want to jump
effectively
on that
than
one first?
what? I'm curious as to what, more effectively than what? So we have, of course, our direct integration between Dux Soup and HubSpot. And there's all sorts of different levels of control that you have within that integration. So when you first install that connector between the various platforms there, Dux Soup is creating some specific fields in HubSpot, which it uses to capture data, to make that data that's coming from LinkedIn into reflected in HubSpot properly. Once that data's in there, now it depends on how you bring it across. So Dux Soup's also bringing across, for example, campaign tags, labels effectively. So the field where in HubSpot where you've got Dux Soup tags, for example, you could use that information there in HubSpot to then determine what happens to that prospect once it hits HubSpot based upon various workflows, et cetera, et cetera. You've also got because it's like a two-way integration. Yeah, you've got data coming from LinkedIn through Dux Soup into HubSpot. You can also trigger actions from within HubSpot. So if you built campaigns or whatever it is you're doing with Dux Soup, you can enroll people into campaigns from HubSpot as long as you've got their LinkedIn URL in the correct field in HubSpot. Dux Soup will automatically populate it there, but there are some people who've got maybe a big database of LinkedIn URLs. They've got them in their HubSpot environment, but the LinkedIn URL's in a different place. So you need to make sure it's in that correct field. And that's all documented on the support pages as well. So that way you've got like a two-way integration. You've got the data coming from LinkedIn into HubSpot, but then you can also trigger actions from HubSpot heading the other way. Yeah, Scott, anything to add there?
Yeah, I was working with a client the other day and we were sort of going through some workflows here to take actions out of HubSpot, right? Once it's already in there. And what we had actually done is leverage the Dux Soup tags, which was super helpful, right? So anytime Dux Soup takes any sort of action, right, it puts a system tag on it, right, with the campaign name and whatever the action was. So campaign name, invited, campaign name, accepted, campaign name, responded, something like that, right? What I did with the client though is we built an active list inside of HubSpot based on one of the campaign tags, which I believe was responded, right? So if the tag did contain responded, then put them into here. And then when they were in an active list, you can actually bulk enroll to people based on like that active list. And so you can bulk enroll them into a Dux Soup campaign rather than doing it one-off per one. But like I said, we have most of this documented on our website and whatnot, or feel free to reach out to our team and I can walk you through that a little bit further, but hopefully that helps.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And I'm gonna go with Sarah Louise has asked, how do I pause my old campaigns?
Turn them off is one way. You can go to your old campaigns and just click the off button and go ahead and hit save. And then that will ensure that those campaigns are not running any further in those cases.
Yeah, that's the only way to do it, really. The only other way would be to go into your queued activity and filter by that campaign and delete everything out of that campaign, and then nothing will get processed. There'll be nothing in the queue then. But if you're just wanting to pause it, as Scott says there, potentially wanting to restart it again in the future with the actions that are in the queue, then you would just turn it off and save.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. I think that's all of the questions for now. Do you want to just run through the top tips, Giles?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah, of course. So in advance of this call today, we were looking at some of the questions we'd had in advance, and just wanted to come up with a couple of top tips really for people who, some simple ideas for people to go away and think about. The top one here, yeah, explore LinkedIn for data sources and lists. Everyone automatically goes to a search result in regular LinkedIn or Sales Navigator, or maybe a lead list. Be aware that Dux Soup runs against loads of different lists on LinkedIn. Now, Scott's mentioned a few already, so post reactions, event attendee lists, alumni groups, group members, etc., etc. Use different data sources and use the power of Dux Soup with either visiting those profiles or scanning that list to then create something else. Make sure that you're familiar with all of these different data sources, because they can be incredibly useful. Looking at, for example, people who are connected to maybe one of your competitors, people who are following a competitor's page, all sorts of different things like that. So don't forget to use those different places. We touched on this one right at the beginning. Visit, visit, visit. You can visit hundreds of profiles a day, especially if you've got a paid LinkedIn account. If you've got a Sales Navigator account, you can be visiting 200, 300, 400 profiles a day without any issues at all. Every visit you do, if you've got your visibility settings set correctly, is potentially a free advertisement for your profile. So just get out there and, you know, you've got an automated robot effectively. Make sure you keep it busy. Yes, you want to be sending out your connection requests, etc., in your campaigns, but make sure you're also doing that as well. Some people forget about this one. You know, we've talked about keeping your LinkedIn profile up to date with relevant skills, etc., but don't be afraid to adapt your headline depending on what you're doing. So, for example, if you're running a business somewhere and you're trying to find somebody to work in your business, update your headline, actively seeking, whatever it might be. If you visit profiles, people will see that and they will engage with you. You know, if you've got certain things, certain promotions on, certain events on, that kind of stuff, don't be afraid to update your headline, because that headline is what people will see when you send them a connection request or when you visit their profile, whatever it may be. Adapt your headline accordingly to your audience and to your campaign and your situation that you're working on, the project you happen to be on. And I think we've touched on this one quite a few times. Don't think about selling, but do start conversations. And you know, I really like Scott's comment earlier about, you know, don't be afraid to be a little bit controversial. You know, just sort of, you know, try and stimulate people to react, because then once you start that conversation, you then can pivot that conversation to your call to action, whatever it may be, whichever area of expertise you're working in. So just a few takeaway items for people who've been patient enough to stay on with us for the complete hour. Hopefully they're valuable to you.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've covered some good stuff there. Just a quick heads up then, I've already pasted the registration link in the chat there. So our next webinar in 2 weeks' time, we'll be looking at how to integrate Dux Soup with your CRM. We mentioned that a little bit earlier. So that's on the 20th of August, we'll be sharing how you can simplify your campaign strategy using Zapier or Make to integrate your chosen CRM with Dux Soup. We're going to be demoing how to trigger LinkedIn actions through Dux from within your CRM. We'll be looking at how to monitor, track and prioritize campaign follow-ups in your CRM and use content and timing to your advantage so that you can improve your conversion rates. So click on the link that I've popped in the chat and you're good to go, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Just a quick recap on the resources that we've got available. We obviously offer one-to-ones. Scott mentioned it earlier on in the session. If you are looking for a one-to-one, you'll be lucky enough to get hold of Giles or Scott. And of course, we've got our support team function who are there to give a quick 15-minute check up on what you've been doing. And last thing for me then, don't forget to leave us a review on G2. I will pop the link in the chat function now as well. And if you pop today's date on, then, and it's a nice review, of course, then we'll get in touch so that we can send you one of our lovely limited edition caps as worn here on the slide by Tracy Eames. So that's it from me. I'd like to say a thank you for those who are still with us, and a thank you for those who didn't join for the entirety because they had to nip off. And thank you to Giles and Scott as well, of course, our LinkedIn ninjas, as I named you today.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. See you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye.